Hello and thank you for joining us on Sideline Story, your destination for sports news, analysis and discussions. I'm Brandon Yates and today we'll be discussing the Wimbledon Tennis Championships. We'll take a look at China's tennis progress, the return of Novak Djokovic, the dominance of a few stars and potential scheduling challenges with the upcoming Paris Olympics. I'll be chatting about these topics with my two fantastic co-hosts, Yang Guang and Tian Yu. And Yang Guang, I think every year, Wimbledon delivers moments that are always momentous, but this year in particular for China is a very, very momentous year. We've got Zhang Zhizhen being the first man from the mainland being ranked at this tournament, which is a very big deal. And I think we also have a record 11 Chinese tennis players participating at Wimbledon this year. So I think that is a fantastic achievement and a great sign of progress being made with tennis in China. What are your thoughts about this incredible achievement?
Yeah, it just tells the consistent improvement of Chinese tennis. I think the Chinese tennis scenario is undergoing the best time, even better than the time when Li Na was playing and winning Grand Slams. Because
it seemed to happen very quickly though, because I guess I'm not the biggest follower of tennis. I mean, I do tend to watch the the Grand Slams and that sort of thing. And ever since I've been in China, I've tried to keep an eye on the likes of Zhang Zhizhen and Zhang Zhizhen and a couple of the other stars. But there just seems to be a very fast growth of, obviously we know Zhang Zhizhen and Zhang Zhizhen are the biggest stars, but there's a couple of other up-and-coming athletes just below them that are also very young, and they seem to have really accelerated their progress this year to a point where we're now seeing 11 Chinese stars performing at Wimbledon. So that growth from the top 2 stars to now having 11 that are competing and playing really well, that's rapid growth seemed, for me at least, as an outsider, I suppose, that growth seemed to happen almost overnight.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to say. Because in the Li Na era, we just had one phenomenal player. That's basically it.
Right, and she was like the marquee player that everybody was looking up to as the star of Chinese tennis, and hopefully that would be the person that would propel the growth of all tennis in China.
Yeah, we didn't have this large scale of a contingent that represents China, especially at Grand Slam events. So yeah, I think that just tells how Chinese tennis is improving these years, especially on the men's side. Zhang Zhizhen's growth is just solid. He's kind of player that makes every step count in his career. I mean, he also fine-tuned his performances on different surfaces, because previously I knew he was a very good player on clay courts.
Right, that's what he was quite well known for, right?
Yeah. He'd made impressive runs at Madrid Open, at the French Open, but not so much on other courts. But this year, he's almost doing equally good on grass. That's the biggest surprise in him to me.
Do you think that just comes from consistent performances and being able to play on different surfaces on a regular basis? Or do you think that him and his coaching team are fine-tuning his game for different surfaces?
I think it's just a strategy of his team focusing on grass this year, because he didn't do that well last year. Okay,
so they identified a playing surface that he wasn't that comfortable on and then worked on that specifically, along with his other, general practicing techniques, but they probably focused on, or at least identified surfaces where he was underperforming and then focused on that in his training.
Yeah, at the Hala Open, ahead of Wimbledon, Zhang Zhizhen beat the likes of Daniil Medvedev.
That was a big one. That was one of the standout performances for me from Chinese tennis players this whole year.
To reach the semi-finals. In the last 4, he lost to Yannick Sinner, but
he put up a good fight against Sinner.
He almost took the second set against the world #1. So that was just an impressive performance.
And considering it's a surface that he's not that comfortable on, so obviously the increased amount of practice and focus on that particular surface has paid dividends.
Absolutely. In the beginning of the year, Zhang Zhizhen set the target of reaching a Grand Slam as a seeded player, and just at a halfway point of the season, he's made it. So
mission accomplished.
He honored his words.
Yeah, fantastic to see. And you and I have had the chance to view him up close and personal, and earlier in the season, or going back to last year, we saw some inconsistencies from him. We saw a little bit of a lack of maturity from him and maybe some nerves as well. And it seems like he really has worked on that side of his game as well. And I guess that comes with maturity. It comes from experience and playing on a regular basis and also fixing and identifying some problems that you may have. So I think there is, look, I'm sure there's a lot going on behind the scenes that we don't get to see as journalists, but whatever he's doing is working. And I think you make a really good point there. He made a promise to himself and to his fans, and he's kept that promise. And I think that in itself is a great achievement.
Yeah.
So I think that's something that we can, you know, as Chinese fans of Chinese tennis players, I think that's something we can all be very, very excited about.
Yeah.
Tianyu, from your side, what do you think about this momentous achievement of, you know, Zhang Zhizhen being ranked at Wimbledon and having 11 Chinese players at this prestigious tournament?
I mean, yeah, I think it's remarkable. I think Chinese tennis has made some steady progress, just both in terms of the number of qualified players, but also the level of competitiveness. And in particular, men's tennis has been quite a big surprise for me. Like you said, Zhang Zhizhen has made some really solid improvements. I think it's two years ago, he was still struggling to go through the qualifying round of Wimbledon, and he was like ranking 281st in the world. And now here he is, ranks as number 33 in the world, he just
and on a, like we've mentioned, a surface that he's not comfortable with.
Yeah.
Well, that's what we thought, but things have definitely changed.
Yeah, becoming the first seeded male Chinese player, a player from the Chinese mainland in the tournament, and his ranking has surged a lot. So we could see that he was. He has really come a long way since the start of this year, from like advancing from both the French Open and also the Australian Open to beating a top 5 player, Daniel Medvedev, in the ATP 500.
And
event.
all of that progress and, you know, all of the improvements that he's made and all of the results that he's been getting against some of the world's greatest players, that's also been incredibly rapid, along with the growth of some of these other Chinese tennis players that will be representing China at Wimbledon.
Yeah, we've been talking about how much this Chinese squad of tennis players have been improving, but they have kind of fast-tracked their improvements in recent years.
I want to talk to some of their coaches and figure out how it's been done so quickly, because it honestly, for me, it really has happened over the space, like you mentioned, over maybe 1 or 2 years. With Zhang Zhizhen in particular, his rapid growth in particular seems to be the quickest. I think with the likes of Zhang Chen, when we've kind of identified her progress and we've been aware of her progress and potential for quite some time now, I think. And Zhang Zhizhen has always been, well, not always been, but for a couple of years now, been the top ranked Chinese player. But like you mentioned, he was very inconsistent and was nowhere near the top of the rankings. But now all of a sudden, he's performing incredibly well and consistently on a variety of surfaces, and has also just shot up the ranks, and is also, you know, keeping promises that he makes to his fans and to himself. So, you know, I think he deserves a lot of credit, but whoever his team is also deserves an incredible amount of credit.
Yeah, seems like just they pulled some kind of a trigger and their career just went on to the right trajectory.
But sometimes 1 or 2 changes or 1 or 2 slight adjustments can really have a major impact on a player's career. I mean, I think back to when Novak Djokovic identified some dietary problems that he was having, and those were fixed. And he also kind of went from being a mid-level, you know, player that was always in like kind of the top 50 and competing here and there and going to the 3rd and 4th round, to all of a sudden
competing with Nadal and
now could potentially go down as one of the greatest tennis players of all time. So maybe something, look, I'm sure a lot of work has been done on and off the court, and I'm sure they've, like we've already mentioned, identified certain problems that have been fixed, but maybe there is something small that we are not aware of that has been changed, or maybe it's a mental shift that Zhang Zhizhen has made, but whatever it is, it's clearly working. And, you know, his progress that has been made so quickly. And that's another thing to bear in mind, is that overnight success generally is a result of many, many years of hard work that we don't get to see. So we consider him an overnight success, but I'm sure there's been days and weeks and months and years of work that he's been putting in that is now potentially at this point in time really showing itself, and that's always great to see.
A successful show takes hundreds of rehearsals.
Exactly. So maybe those rehearsals that he's been involved in have really paid off. But look, I still think that the biggest star and prospect of Chinese tennis is Zhang Zhizhen, and for some reason we've seen her knocked out at the first round of Wimbledon. And, you know, I've mentioned this a couple of times when we've spoken about her in previous tennis-themed podcasts, that she clearly has the talent. You know, she's young and she still has some development to achieve. But I still think the mental side of her game is something that really needs to be worked on. She really does, at some points, seem to really bear the pressure that's put on her by fans and journalists and people that identify her as this world-class talent.
Agree.
And she just really seems to sometimes be greatly affected by those external factors. So do you think that Yang Guang, her surprise loss in that first round match at Wimbledon had something to do with the mental side of her game, or was there something else at play?
Well, it was a big shock to me, maybe the biggest shock in the opening round at Wimbledon.
I'd have to agree.
And it's such a slap in my face because a couple of weeks ago I said Zhang Zhiwen's consistency is just excellent.
But I think we all felt that, and I think she has displayed consistency throughout the last at least 2 years, I would say. And she's achieved some incredible feats, like getting to the final of the Australian Open and, you know, all of these other achievements and being in the top 10, etc., etc. But it seems, and generally we've seen the mental side of things affect her when she gets to the knockouts, well, the later knockout rounds, so, you know, quarterfinal, semi-final, final. But the first round?
Yeah, it's hard for her fans and for herself. I mean, Zhang Zhiwen is a top player for sure, but she needs to understand that anyone can still beat her on the tour. And it's normal, even for the top players like Serena Williams, like Swiatek, they can experience opening round or second round exits.
But it's very rare though, right?
Yeah.
It's not something we see often.
Yeah, I don't see this a pure disaster for her. Rather, it's a good lesson.
It could be a disaster in the lead up to the Olympics, though, because I think mentally, if that is the problem that she's experiencing, if she's going to have a huge confidence knock like this by being knocked out of the first round at Wimbledon, what kind of confidence is she going to carry into the Paris Olympics? That's a little bit concerning for me, for Team China.
Yeah, but I would see this as a wake-up call for her, that if you cannot push forward or you just stay where you are at, then probably you will move backwards.
I guess how she deals with this disappointment is going to be up to her. So she can take it as a confidence knock and also perform incredibly badly at the Paris Olympics, or like you said, she can see it as a wake-up call and put all of her emphasis now on, you know, getting herself right physically and mentally for representing China on the world stage.
Yeah, I think it's just time to move forward. Just forget about what happened in Wimbledon and focus on Paris.
I'd agree. Tianyu, she mentioned that she was struggling with pain in her arm, and I think she also said she was having eye issues. So she had a couple of fairly reasonable excuses after the match to explain why her performance was so bad. But I mean, I think there were, if I'm not mistaken, 8 double faults. For someone that is in the top 10 of world tennis, I think
rare.
In the first round, I think I wouldn't even call that rare. I would say that's inexcusable unless you are battling an injury. So maybe there are some factors that she's dealing with that aren't mental, that we aren't necessarily aware of. But from your side of things and what you saw, what do you think happened in that first round match?
Yeah, I think maybe physical condition that you mentioned plays a role in his early exit. But she has been enduring some inconsistency issue for quite some time, I think. I think even though she has made some substantial progress by becoming a top 10 player, it's time for her to really, like Yang Guang said, take some time to do some reflection.
It's
and
weird though,
reinforce
because
his-
she takes like 10 steps forward and we think, oh, this is the next big prospect. She's going to win a Grand Slam. And then all of a sudden, when we get the most excited about her,
Yeah.
she takes a huge backfall, like getting knocked out of the first round at Wimbledon, where I thought she would be one of the contenders for the title.
Yeah, maybe it's a great occasion for her to take some reflection and, reinforce her areas of weaknesses. Her mindset seems to be like a big issue. She seems to be losing her concentration and tempo completely when she was falling behind or simply losing her advantage.
She definitely seems to be a player that thrives on confidence.
Yeah.
And if there's any sort of little knock to that confidence during a match, it really unsettles her more than any other player that I can think of that's playing currently.
She needs to take some time to think about that, how
Yeah.
to adjust.
Slow things down.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of players that have had time to think and deal with a couple of issues, Novak Djokovic is making his return to Wimbledon, and we've seen him struggle with a couple of issues. Yang Guang, of course, we know he's aging and he might be struggling with fitness a little bit and may be on the decline in terms of his career. And of course, now he's making a very swift return from a knee injury, which in a sport like tennis can be highly impactful. So do you think that this return to Wimbledon so soon after that knee injury is a risk worth taking?
I don't know how bad injury was, but still it was a torn meniscus
Yeah.
in his knee. It sounds very severe.
And also with grass, I think knee injuries are also, and ankle injuries are particularly dodgy because you slide so much on that grass.
And grass so slippery.
Yeah, we've seen a couple of instances in the past, and I think Djokovic is one of those players that we've seen fall over the most at Wimbledon. I don't remember which year it was. I think it could have been last year or a couple of years back, but I remember one particular match where Djokovic was playing on grass and he slipped multiple times and kept looking at the surface and was kind of questioning the surface. So for someone to be struggling with a knee issue at his age on a very slippery, well, potentially slippery surface, it seems like a potential mix of a potential disaster.
Yeah, he called the operation very successful, and he said injury wasn't that bad, but I think he still should have, guaranteed his body is 100% ready for Wimbledon. Not only because of his age, but also, the intense game schedule. Don't forget, he's also had the Paris Olympics in sight.
Yeah.
But I guess if he is now playing at Wimbledon and he's got the access to the best doctors in the world and he knows his own body and he's been on the tour for so many years, you would assume that he and his team have agreed that he is fully capable of competing at Wimbledon. I don't think, considering how many titles he's won, I don't think he would have taken the chance of not playing at 100% and potentially risking further injury. So my assumption would be he believes that he's at 100, well, not 100%, but he's at least able to play to a certain level without being concerned about making the injury more severe.
Yeah, we can't sneak into his ad to get his thoughts, but everyone knows the biggest desire for Djokovic now is to win the Grand Slam titles and the Paris Olympic title. So he would not miss any chance to go to those events, considering the fact that it might not be enough time for him to, win those big titles.
Yeah. Tian Yu, with that in mind, if he does have that mindset of doing everything that he can to make sure that he can compete in all of the Grand Slams and the Olympics, he's told the press that he is, that he had a successful knee surgery and that he is ready to play at Wimbledon. But like Yang Guang said, maybe he does see, the clock is ticking and he might not get the chance to win another Wimbledon title. So maybe he's taken a risk here. Maybe he's not as ready as he's made fans and journalists believe. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, of course, from the perspective of an amateur, I would say the best solution here is to give your knees more time to recover. But as someone who has been playing tennis professionally and in top level for so many years,
for decades,
I think Djokovic himself knows the best about his body condition.
But maybe he's taken a risk because he sees that clock is ticking. So, I'm sure he does know when he is at peak condition and when he's playing at 100%. And maybe he's just putting the message out there, look, I'm 100%, I'm ready to dominate, I'm ready to play, I'm the best player in the world. But behind the scenes, maybe there's a little bit less confidence
Yeah,
about
I
his
agree.
state right now. That's my thought.
Yeah, yeah.
I think that he's putting out this message that he's 100% fit and ready to play, and you know, to kind of let his opponents know, you know, play the mental game and say, look, I'm Novak Djokovic and I'm performing at my highest level. But I think off the court, him and his doctors must be thinking, this is a bit of a risky, dodgy situation. Yeah.
And I think what Yang Guang says, just like what Yang Guang says, his desire to play is the most important factor.
At Grand Slams.
Yeah, at Grand Slams. I think it's that's something that separates these top players from the rest, because they are willing to take risks in adversity. Like,
And they save their best for Grand Slam tournaments. So we've often seen the likes of Medvedev and a couple of these other players win all of these ATP tournaments, and then at the Grand Slams, all of the regular suspects absolutely destroy them. And I think that's in particular is what separates the greats from the up-and-comers, is their performances and their wins at Grand Slams.
Yeah, they go all out in critical matches.
But still, it doesn't feel right to me. I mean, I think he's risking himself of more potential injury problems, which might shorten his remaining career. I really don't want to see another case of Nadal's career being ruined by repetitive injury problems.
But I mean, you know, maybe Tianyu, is he desperate? Is he just desperate to do everything that he can to play at as many Grand Slams as he possibly can before, you know, his knees or his body gives up on him?
I'm starting to feeling that it's his last year of his career.
Well, maybe the last year where he is competitive at levels that he's accustomed to.
Yeah, and maybe you're right. He just feels that the clock is ticking on his career, and he wants to take the most of his remaining career to finally win a title and draw like a grand finale to his career.
And Yang Guang, some of those players that are breathing down his neck, Yannick Sinner, Carlos Alcaraz, I think those are the ones that where he looks at and thinks the clock is ticking. I need to try and grab one or two more Grand Slams before these guys come and just completely take over. But at this point, have Yannick Sinner, Carlos Alcaraz, and maybe one or two others already taken over? Are they the new dominant force in men's singles?
I think so. I think it's like the beginning of a new version of Roger Federer against Rafael Nadal. It very much looks like the...
That's a big statement to make so early on, considering how many titles those two won.
In 2 years, you will agree with me.
Maybe they'll also just make one or two adjustments in their diet or something and completely dominate men's tennis. Or maybe we'll see Djokovic's knee absolutely blow out. I hope that doesn't happen. I really hope that he has taken a risk that's fairly well calculated. But like you've mentioned, with Zhang Zhizhen, we've just seen such a rapid growth in their game. Maybe we can see the same from these two.
Yeah, to me it feels very much like the duel between those two legendary names in the very early stages.
The very, very early stages. They've got a long way to go, yeah.
But
with that in mind though, I think that those two in particular, Sinner and Alcaraz, have achieved more in their early stages than we've seen from previous champions, the likes of Nadal, Djokovic, and Federer.
Agree.
So I think that they are claiming titles a lot sooner than those others did. And I think that's remarkable.
Yeah, and I do expect those two players to rule men's tennis in the coming years, splitting the Grand Slam titles and providing us with classic clashes on the biggest stages that will be written into history book.
Do you think they're already there though? Or do you think that there might still be some competition from the older guns?
They have stood out, and they are on their way to those legendary names.
But not quite there yet, right?
Not yet.
Yeah. Still some time to go. Tianyu, from your side of things, do you think that Sinner and Alcaraz have arrived? Are they now the kings of men's singles? Or do they still have to bide their time and maybe see the likes of Djokovic win one or two more Grand Slam titles?
Yeah, we can agree that Sinner and Alcaraz have been in the vanguard of the new generation players. Alcaraz is defending champion of Wimbledon, and Sinner came to this tournament with really fantastic forms, having just won his maiden grass court title. But the only question is that whether or not they can reach the lasting level of competitiveness of the big three players.
The consistency, right?
Yeah. To really achieve their feat of the big three, I think both of them need to show more consistency and simply go on and win more titles.
Look, I think they've shown consistency over the last 2 years, but the other names that we've mentioned, Djokovic, Nadal, Federer, they've had 20 years ahead of some of these names that we've mentioned. So I think they've already shown signs of consistency. We just need to bide our time, I suppose, as fans and as journalists, and so do they, to see if they can attain that sustained consistency that some of those names were able to achieve literally for decades, which is kind of a once-in-a-generation sort of happening. And I think that Sinner and Alcaraz have the potential to achieve something like that, but and they have shown signs of that, but it is very early days. But the signs are promising.
I know fans miss the time when Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, and Novak Djokovic are competing together on the tour. Many fans do. But I think fans also need to move forward.
I think they're ready to move on now. They're tired of seeing these guys with busted knees going out there and struggling with busted backs and crawling all over the court and really showing their age sometimes. I think they're ready for the young guns to take over the old guard.
Yeah. While appreciating what old guns did, they need to value what the young guns have done.
For sure.
I mean, Jannik Sinner is such a phenomenal player. Watching his game is like watching a match with 1.2 times speed. He's so used to that super fast speed.
Have you ever seen the musical Annie?
Yeah,
with the red hair, the curly red hair. I always think that Sinner's hairstyle makes him look like Annie. But you know, so his appearance is kind of like he's quite unassuming. You know, he doesn't seem like this deadly world-class athlete, but when he's out there on the court, he shows incredible play, incredible aggression, skill, stamina. Technique. He really is a phenomenon.
A gentle killer.
Yeah, a silent killer. Yeah, but an amazing player. And doesn't look Italian either. It's amazing. Yeah, when I heard he was Italian, I was quite surprised.
And Alcaraz, I don't think his opponents know what he would do next in every possession of the game.
He's been a little bit less consistent than Sinner, I suppose. Quite like up and down.
Yeah, but I see him as a natural talent.
Oh, for sure.
Even if you are a mind reader, you can't predict what his next move would be. I don't think he knows himself. He just lets the game flow.
He lets his talent just take over. And I think that's why, like you mentioned, some of those battles going forward between Sinner and Alcaraz could be really interesting because they are equally brilliant, but in such different ways. And they've got such different styles and approaches to the game. So that... you know, those differences are always very exciting to watch. And I think that's what we also loved seeing between Nadal and Federer in particular was the clash of styles.
Yeah.
And I think we could see something very similar from Sinner and Alcaraz going forward.
Yeah.
But sticking with this year, of course, you know, it's an Olympic year, the Paris Olympics on clay court. I think that's going to be amazing to watch for tennis fans. But it is so close to the Wimbledon Championship. So that scheduling, I think particularly with older players, is going to be quite complicated. Do you see some potential problems there for certain players, Yang Guang?
Yeah, first of all, they need to deal with the fatigue. There will be less than 2 weeks to rest before the Paris action begins. And the second challenge, they need to be adapted to the new surface.
Yeah.
Because the Olympics tennis events are returning to the clay courts for the first time in 32 years.
Completely different to grass.
Yeah.
Literally chalk and cheese.
So the mode of the players' action this year would be like adapting to clay, then to grass, then grass back to clay.
Yeah.
So it's a difficult transition.
Doesn't sound like something that's good for the knees, Djokovic.
Exactly.
Yeah, sounds like the worst thing you could do for your knee, actually.
I'm thinking of Nadal maybe could expect some good results from him because he was just quit Wimbledon and focus
another uncle performing at the top levels. Yeah. He could be a surprise, and I think as Wimbledon progresses and as we get to the Olympics, I think we're going to see plenty of surprises. But regardless of what happens, I think we are in for some seriously exciting tennis as the weeks progress. But that's all we have time for on this week's episode of Sideline Story. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, we will be back next week with our latest topic, and we'll see you then.
This is CGTN Radio. Hear the difference.